So here's a quick short tutorial for how to download Unreal Engine. So what we're going to do is in Google, you're going to want to search up Unreal Engine download. So we can go ahead and here and click one of the first links here. And here it gives you the step-by-step. So first we have to download the Epic Game Launcher. So we can go ahead and click this install button and just download the Epic Games Launcher. And you can go ahead and open this up. So once you install the Epic Games Launcher and launch it, you should be met with a screen like this once you log in. And from here, on the left side, you can go to Unreal Engine. And then you can go to Library. And then here you're going to see engine versions. And then what you're going to do is click this plus sign for the engine version. And right here, you can see all the possible engine versions. And of course, it won't be showing the versions I have here. But it goes back all the way to the 4.0. I would suggest using a newer version. Maybe not the preview for 5.7, but maybe using the version I'm on, 5.6.1, or any other version that you feel like. But like I said, I suggest using a newer version as they're more optimized. But once you get that, you're going to want to go ahead and click install. And it shall install the project, and you can choose the location. I usually just leave the default location. You can just create a shortcut, but I won't create a shortcut for this. And you're just going to go ahead and click install. And when you install it, you'll see right here on the left side your latest activity. So it's going to go ahead and initialize this. And then once you get that up and installed, we can load in. I'm launching a different version because I already have one of those installed. You'll be met with a screen like this. And then from here, we'll be going straight into our tutorials. And we're going to be using Blink. There are a couple of these other options here, like first person, third person, top down, AR, VR, and vehicle. And basically these all just have pre-built almost bodies for you to mess around with. So I do suggest everyone mess around with these if they have free time. But if not, no worries. I'll be going over these in the future videos. So we're going to be messing with Blink, like I said earlier. We're going to be we can leave it in Blueprint. As we won't be messing with C++, and we'll just be doing world building in this one. So let's just call this, I'm gonna just call this my world as the project name. So let's just go ahead and create this. Okay, so once the world loads, you'll be met with pretty much this blank screen right here. And basically, first is we're gonna just teach you the bare bones basics of Unreal. So what we're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna look around. And in order to look around, you're gonna wanna hold down right click, and you're able to move your mouse and look around. And to move around, you have to hold down right click and press WASD, of course, for forward, backwards, left, and right. And to go up and down, you can press Q and E. So those two will bring you up and down. And you might be wondering that we're really slow. So in order to fix this, in the top right here, and you can see the set camera speed. And what we can do is we can just launch this to 32. So whenever you're holding right click and you press W, you notice a lot faster. But instead of having to go there and change that like manually, if you hold right click and you scroll wheel up or down, depending on if you want to speed up or slow down, you can see it affects it. So you can speed it up pretty fast. So you can fly pretty far away here. And yeah, and don't worry if we lose our spawn island because we won't be messing with that. So yeah. So once we get the basic movement down, what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the file, new, and we're going to go into empty open world. There is a couple like this open world that we were just in. Basic and empty level, empty open world. Empty open world is basically just a lot of landscaping capabilities in here since it is open world. But not needlessly, it is kind of the same as empty level, but I just prefer this one. So once you create the world, you'll be met in this empty space here, of course. So what you want to do is make sure you slow down your speed if you sped it up really high like mine, just so we don't get lost. And what we're going to do is going to go to the selection mode on the top left, click landscape. And what we're going to want to do is just change the overall resolution. We can do 1009 by 1009. I will be dropping a link to documentation in the description below for formatting of this and a more in-depth explanation, as I will not be going over this. So if you guys are interested, you can go ahead and look at that. But if not, we can just go ahead and do 1009 by 1009. What we're going to do is create. And depending on your machine, it will take a little bit to load again, as it is a new process, and we're importing a whole new world here. All right, now we're loaded in. So let's slow this down. And I'm going to scroll, basically get up here, and so we can look around. We can go File, and then let's save current level as. And in here, let's create a new folder, and we'll just call this Map. And this is just basically helps you organize better for future references, and like if you're using different maps, because you can use multiple maps in the same game. So this is just helps you organize things. So you can do maps, and then once we get into blueprints, you'll be able to create a blueprint folder, texturing folder, and there's just a whole bunch of other folders that we we'll need in the future. So it is best to do this for best practice. So let's go ahead and just call this, I'm going to call this sculpting tool. So we're going to save this. All right. And you might be wondering that it is really dark and how are we going to really see? So here's a simple tool for lighting, and I will go more in depth in lighting later on once we get further in this. So what I want to do is go to Window, and we're going to want to go to Environment and Light Mixer here. And you can manually do this, and I will drop a video if you want to manually mess with lighting as well now. But you don't have to worry about it for now. So what we can do is create skylight, create directional light, create atmosphere, volume scaling, and fog height. All right, and there you are, and we pretty much have a default standard world here. So what we're going to want to do here is if you got out of the landscape mode, we're going to click landscape mode, and then we can go ahead and start messing around with these tools. So I'm going to get a little closer, actually. I lied about going far away. And I'm going to basically explain the simplicities of these tools. So first, we'll go into the sculpting tool, and you can see here there is a brush fall off. And if you hover over these, they do kind of explain these more in like detail, I guess. So you can see the strength is brush tool. So these go pretty in depth, but I'm going to be explaining these tools for y'all as well. So the brush type, we're going to just leave this on this just simple brush. And there are a couple of these. You can just, there's like pattern brushes here. And we won't be really messing with these. We'll just be going pretty simple for this one, as it is just a beginner one. So we're going to use this, and we can probably jack this up a little bit. Since I want to create, what I'm going to do is basically create a mountain range here. I'm going to create a little mountain range here, and maybe just like a little like area in the middle. It's almost like a canyon. So let's just go ahead and mess around with this. So you guys can see when you hold left click and you kind of brush it around, it's almost like a paint tool. You kind of drag it around, you kind of mess around with it. And I'm going to just restart that, and I just hit Control Z to delete what I had. But like I said, you can just go to the erase and kind of undo what you did there as well if you're feeling that way, if you don't want to Control Z. But I just wanted to undo that because I didn't really like the look of that. So I will be using this. Let's just increase the strength, and we can increase the brush size a little bit since we can get a little weird with this mountain. And so what this fall off does is it changes the fall off of the edge for the tool here. So as you can see, these are a little more sharper, and this one's a little more rounded, as you can see here. And this one will be a little bit more pointed in that sense. As you can see, there's like different variations to this. So I'm gonna go ahead and just erase this, just so we can go back to the mountain. Let's go sculpt, and I like just using this original. Let's up this tool strength so we can kind of get it mounted up and going. And this first one doesn't have to be too insane, as we're just gonna be messing around with the tool here, and we're just gonna be seeing what we can do in this short amount of time that we have. And I do suggest messing around with these other tools a little more in depth than I will be going in this video. And then we can mess with these other tools. So let's use smooth, so we can kind of smoothen out these edges. You kind of see how this does that. It almost flattens in a sense. But hold on, I don't like that one there. But let's smoothen this a little bit, and you can kind of make it. Let me change the brush size a little bit so we can get a little more accurate here and like the smoothness of these edges on this corner here, just so I can make it more rounded. Because I feel like I want to put maybe something in here. And so you see we have this. So I think this will be just a little platform I will have. So let me smooth this out a little bit. Or a little like circular mountain range almost. And then I think I'm going to have maybe water in the middle here. So what I'm going to do is go back to the sculpting tool. And then I'm going to change the brush size to a pretty large brush size. Let's change the strength here a little bit lower. Fall off. You can also change the effect of the fall off, which I forgot to mention. As you can see here, this outside layer, it's hard to point to, but I'll point to it in the editing of this. And this layer right here, this basically just shows the fall off of the item you are using. So you can see there, it kind of sharpens it, if that makes sense. So the sharper the point, which basically means the higher the variable, the harsher the fall off, as you can see there. But if you don't want any fall off, you can just go to 0, and you kind of see it does that. And since it is a little weird because there is no fall off, so you always want to have just at least a little bit. 0.3 or like the default 0.5 that they have is it's a pretty strong one. And I think it's a pretty good, nice standard one. So we'll just leave it at that. All right, but like I said, let's go back into the sculpting. And say I want to dip it down because I want to add water in here later. So maybe, let me make this brush size a little bit smaller. Actually, I lied. So if you hold shift and left click, you can see it creates like it's a little, like it goes down. So this is another way you can mess with stuff. So I'm gonna create like a little pond here, and let's use the smoothing tool. Let's just smoothen it out a little bit, just so it's a little smoother, a little more circular. And then we could add some erosion to this as well if we want to mess with this, make it look a little better with the texturing. And let's throw some erosion on here too. Oh wow, let's change that strength down. Wow. Threshold. Alright, so we can mess with this a little bit if we want to. You don't have to do too much here. We can kind of just understand by what it is doing, and you can kind of see it's adding a little bit of a texture to this in the sense of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a ramp here, right here in this little spot here. So what we want to do is we can go ahead and get above it, and we can go ahead and click ramp tool. Let's left click here, left click there, and you can see it kind of creates a little like thing like this. And what you want to do is you can just press enter, or you can click add ramp, and you can kind of see how it cuts a hole right in between this. So we can just go ahead and leave that, or we can actually make this, if we wanted to, maybe a little bit more up here. And you can mess with these, of course. I forgot to go more in depth in this on the X, Y, and Z. And if you're ever confused on what color you're messing with, or like what plane you're messing with, in the bottom left it shows the colors here. As you can see, X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to shorten this a little bit so we can have more room to see, as this is not important right now. But let's just go ahead and do maybe something like this. Alright, and that just creates like a nice default ramp we can just mess with. So from here on, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go and basically texture this whole little area. And so there are a couple ways we can go about this. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to go to Window, and we want to go to Fab. You can go to the Fab store on Google if that is your preferred way, and I will leave a link in the description for the Fab store there. And that is a nice way to grab assets and import them. But I personally don't prefer that way, just because it is a lot weirder like importing them into your project, as you have to be in the Unreal like homepage and or the Epic Games launcher, and then import them there and then go into the game. So I personally don't like that. So let's go ahead and just search up I actually have one in my library already that we can use. And where is it? The MW landscape right here. This one is a pretty much auto materialer, and it pretty much cuts down all the work for painting the landscape. I will be dropping a quick tutorial in the description as well for if you want to actually use the painting tool. And it's a short little video that I found, and I believe it goes over everything that is the most important in the painting tool. So if you want to go ahead and get this MW landscape auto material, what you want to do before you add anything to your project is you want to make sure it is compatible with the version you're in, and we're in 5.6, so this version is compatible with us, so we can go ahead and add this to our project. But if it is uncompatible, you unfortunately just not be able to use it because it's not made for the version you're in, of course. So let's go ahead and just add this to project, and it might take a second to get in, but everything should import in, and you will most likely get a pop-up like this. You can just go ahead and exit out, and I'll show you how to get back to this in a minute, and we can go ahead and just close out of the Fab Store. That, or you could also drag it up here if you wanted to quickly tap back to the Fab Store later on if you're like more interested in those. So you can just leave that there, and we'll be going over how to import assets as well. So once we go into that, what we're going to want to do is we can kind of just, actually we can go back into selection mode, and we can drag this page out here. So what we're going to do is click landscape, and in landscape we're going to do the landscape material here. So we're going to go to content drawer, and then you see how it imported here, MW landscape auto material. So we're going to click here. We're going to want to go to materials, and before we go into materials, they do have maps here showing examples of their stuff that auto imports as well. So if you want to go ahead and mess with those as well and look around and see what they do with their specific stuff, you can, and I do suggest it. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to go to materials, we're going to go to landscape, and here we are. And there is a couple different examples here. What we can go into is we can go into the island example. And as you can see, it auto creates basically like texturing for us. So it texturizes everything. So what we want to do is we're going to want to double click this. And as you can see, there is a bunch of stuff in here. So we can just turn off this water. We can just turn off all of this water here. If you want to, you can leave it on and see what it messes around with, but I just like turning it off. There's dirt here, so we can kind of just leave that as well. The grass, this is where we're going to want to mess with the grass level a little bit, because the grass is non-existent here. Like, we're seeing 2 specks of grass on this full map. So what we're gonna do is maybe mess with the position here. So let's up this. So as you can see, it ups it depending on the value here. So the higher it is, the higher up it will crawl, of course. So as you can see, it's just gonna start crawling up. So we can kind of just like, let's lower it a little bit actually. I think that is a fine amount. And you kind of see there is water added in. So what we're going to do is make sure this water is off. Hold on, let's click this. Let's turn this off. Let's turn that to false is what I meant. There you are. So as you can see, all this grass is being loaded in. And you can change the intensity of the grass like that. But we can just leave that at 1. The auto stuff is pretty much has a nice like structure for this. So as you can see, here's our grass. And we can just leave that as that. And you guys, I suggest everyone mess around with this. And you can mess around with the texturing here, as this plugin has a couple different textures. So if you want, instead of like sand, you can do more stones or whatever. So this, since this one is sand, we can do, let's do stone. We'll click this one. And then let's do stone. So it just changes everything into stones. I don't really like the sand personally in this plugin, but if you want to, you can just revert it back. There is 2 different ones for stones and rocks. So you can do the rock roughness. So you can kind of see how that affects the layers a little bit. But like I said, this one does a pretty strong, has a pretty nice way of just auto-generating everything. So what I'm going to do is I kind of want to change the snow a little bit, because I'm not really liking how it is looking as well. So let's go ahead and mess with the snow. Let's mess with this. Let's see how this looks. The UV size. Oh, that's the UV size actually. It should be the world position. So we can kind of up this. So we can kind of just see how it changes this affecting. Like, so you can kind of see how we could drag that a little lower. I actually don't hate how this looks right now. Although it might look a little wonky, and you can see it kind of procedure generates this, which is a really cool feature about this plugin. So, so I like this. So we can honestly just leave it like that right now. And there is other stuff that you can mess with as well. But, and I will drop a video of someone explaining this furthermore in the description if y'all are interested. So we can just go ahead and save this. We can go back, and I would suggest saving it again. So we see this big hole here, and we might be wondering, how are we going to add water to this? So there are a couple different ways we can go about this. There is a plugin that we can use which simply adds water. But I will be going over the most simplest form of adding water. What we're going to do is click this up here, the square with the plus sign, which is just the quickly. We're going to go to shapes. We're going to go to plane. And here on the right side, we can just enlarge this a little bit if you want to. It has location, rotation, and scale. So what we want to do is just maybe make this 100 by 100. And this is the same thing as X, Y, and Z. You can see it's color coded here. So just everyone mess around with that. So let's go. We can kind of make this a little smaller. Let's drag this around. Let's make sure it is the size of our hole. So we can go ahead and move this around. And this is kind of perfect here. So let's go ahead and make it to right there. So there are a couple keybinds that I will show you as well really quickly, just so before I forget. So if you press Q, as you can see in the top left, it goes through my things here. So Q is select objects, W is translating, E is rotating, and then R is scaling. So these 4 are pretty nice quick keybinds, but if not, you can just go on the top left and just go ahead and click these. So we can go ahead and change it. If we want to change the scalability this way, we can as well if you want to get more manual. So we can go ahead and do that just so it's we're not wasting a little space here. So we can go ahead and do this. Just kind of move this a little over. Just so we can kind of keep it the size of this. So right now we have this white square. All right. So in order to add water, what we can do is when we're in this plane here, there's materials here. You can see element 0. So what we're going to do is go back to our content drawer. Let's go back to all. We can just close this content. Let's go into engine. So what we're going to do here is we can go to water. Water should be a default plugged in one. So what we're going to do is right click this, copy reference, go back to our content here. We can go ahead and close this here. So whenever you get into content, what we're going to do is just Control V here. And then you can just copy it here. And you can just Control C, Control V, but I like right clicking to make sure it's this instance that I'm copying. So what we're going to do is right click, and then we're going to create instance material. And we're just going to call this M water fin. So we can call this. So once we have the M water fin created, what we're going to want to do is we can just go ahead and drag this into the element to 0. And there you are. We have water. So that is a nice little tool here we can do to add water. There is a couple things we can do here, a little more. So what we can go is go back into the plane. And then we can go ahead and mess with elements. So we can go ahead and double click this. And the reason we created a new copy is we don't want to mess with the instance in the whole engine itself. And we can mess with the water itself. We can change the max depth, the turbidity, and the watercolor as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to mess with the watercolor. So what we can do is there is a forum online as well for certain numbers. But we can go ahead and just drag this out. So you can kind of see if we wanted to pull the blood, there it is. So let's kind of revert this to what it was. 0. So we can go ahead and change this a little bit to make it a little darker maybe. Change the reds and blues. So let's go back to this. So so it is all we can leave it all at 0, honestly, leave it like this. It is a little darker, but it kind of makes it look like more realistic water as well. So we can go and just mess with these colors a little bit. We can kind of just add a little bit to whatever we're feeling. So I suggest everyone mess around with that, but we can just go ahead and remove that. The waves, you can change wave sizes here. So you can add this, so you can kind of see if you're creating ponds or little smaller things, you can kind of mess with the waves here. But I would suggest just leave it in this default. And you can also change the strength of this. So we can go ahead and change this a little slower so it's a little more still. You can kind of see how it affects it here if we get a little closer. And I'll move this around. So you can kind of see how it affects that. There is flow. You can change the flow speed. So if we want this really fast, so if you're having rage and rapids, we can honestly crank this out. And you can change direction as well if you want to. And it just changes it depending on the position. You kind of see like that. But right now we can just leave it like that. Effects, there are a couple of different effects here, but we won't be messing with this. There's wind gusts and wind gust size as well. But that is basically the simple formatting of this. Okay, so now after we've added all this, let's go ahead and start adding some foliage to this, or some trees and maybe some rocks. So what we can do is we can go ahead and head back to this fab store if you have it tabbed like I do, and we can just search up maybe rocks. And what you always want to do here is you want to sort by free, because there is stuff that costs money. And here in the compatibility also we can set it for our version only. So let's go ahead and just do that as well. So let's set it for minimum 5.6. 5.6. So we can go ahead and see here. These are all the things that will be in our version here. Just another easy way to do this. Let's look at the Common Hazel one real quick. And in most of these packs, they will show you images of what they actually are importing. So I actually don't hate this. So let's just go ahead and add this to our project. And I do suggest everyone just go ahead and look around for stuff if they want to, if they want in the Fab Store. There's a lot of free stuff you can look for in here. And you can also depending on what you want, you can also organize it like this, building architecture, stuff like that. There is a lot of stuff that you can see costs a lot of money, $130. So I do suggest ordering by price, so you don't get clickbaited and accidentally almost buy one, which happened to me the other day. I was looking at these assets and I thought that they're awesome. And you can see there's also game animation sample packs. There's also a couple starter games here that you can mess around with. So while we're waiting for that to install, we can go ahead and just, in the Fab Store, we can go search for maybe some assets that we want to import. So let's go ahead and search up cabin. And then search up for the price. Let's change this to free. And here is a cabin here. We can go ahead and get this one in. And always make sure on some of these, it will have you select the license. And make sure you click personal whenever you sort by free, because the personals will all be free. And they have professional here. And it's just a weird thing that Unreal has done to, I guess, almost capitalize on this. So this cabin isn't looking too bad. So we can go ahead and just add this to our project. And of course, you can grab assets from online and import them in. So as you can see, it opens in our content browser, and it should pop up a thing like this. But I'm going to go ahead and close this. And what we're going to do is go to content drawer and go to content. And you can see all of our folders here. And like I said, we love folders in just game development because it just helps format everything and keep everything organized. So let's go to Fab, Old Cabin, and you can see here the materials. Or not the materials, it should be the static mesh, sorry. So from here, we can pretty much just drag and drop this into our project here. And we can go ahead and use our tools and just go ahead and scale this. So let's undo that. Let's just grab the middle and scale this up pretty big. Let's go ahead and rotate this around. Let's go ahead and move this back. And I do suggest you guys get familiar with these keybinds, as it does just help in general. So here's our default little like house here. It's a nice, nothing crazy house, but it just adds to the environment. And I'm gonna assume our foliage is done importing. So let's go ahead and go into the content drawer. Here it is, Common Hazel, and you can go ahead and click this. Pivot Painter. There's a simple wind. I'm assuming this is a wind animation one. So we can go ahead and just use either of these. What we're going to do is click this first one, and we're going to hold Shift and then left click on this one. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go into Foliage. And from here, whenever all these are selected, is what we're going to want to do is just drag this all into here. And it's basically just going to load it up, and it usually takes just a couple seconds. But these have loaded up, so we can go ahead and click all of these as a check to basically say that we're going to use these. So you can see these all have different things here. And this painting tool basically works as the sculpting as well. So as you see here, you see a little like orb. And if we click here, oh, let me get a little closer. You can see it adds in from the stuff we imported. And these tools pretty much work the same. So let's go ahead and just erase this because I don't like how that looked. Let's go into Paint. And let's go ahead and double check and save because my game is running a little slower. And with these tools as well, of course, if you're doing a lot at one time, it will crash your Unreal Engine if you don't have the strongest system. So what we're going to do is go to the Paint. And there is a couple instances here. So if we hover over these, they basically tell you the simple functions of them. So what we're going to do, since we have these all checked, is we're going to want to up this brush size a good healthy amount. So let's lower it to that actually. Let's look around. Brush size for here. Let's change this paint density. Let's change it a little lower. And we can see it affects how much foliage is in here. So let's go ahead and like mess around with this. You can kind of see how it places all these randomly. And if we change the paint density, it will add 1,000,000 of them. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and erase a good amount of this. So let's go ahead and just re-erase all this. So let's go ahead and paint. Let's just go ahead and paint. Oh, I forgot to change this to a little lower. So let's Control Z that. So you can kind of see we're adding to this. We can go ahead and just like click around here. And you can mess around with the eraser. So say you feel like you added too much, but you don't want to erase it all because you like the look of it. So what we can do here is in the erase tool, you can also change the erase density. So you can kind of affect how much you erase in here. So if we change this brush size to like max and change this density, so we can kind of just delete a couple small items here. But yeah, this is pretty much the simplest tutorial I can give you guys on creating a little world here. So as you can see, we have a nice little like cabin that we imported here. We built it up some mountains. We added some water and we added some foliage here. We have a little ramp. Next, I will show you guys how to actually import a character, but that'll be in the next workshop as we'll be going to more character-based stuff. But here's the simplicity of just the simple world building aspects of Unreal that is already built in. And in the next video as well, whenever we're doing character stuff, I will be using a plugin tool. I'll be using a couple plugin tools, and I'll be explaining those as well for more aspects into the world building. But let's go ahead and get a little closer here, and let's go ahead and just full screen this. So let's go ahead and just click play, and let's go ahead and select mode. And we can go ahead and just close this. We can add these back later. So as you can see here, it is running a little slow, but you can kind of see how, especially the material I selected was the wind affected one. Kind of see how the wind is affecting this. And in the settings, I'm sure we can mess with the wind. And you can see kind of jumping up and down. And that is just the wind almost effect on it. Kind of see what it's doing here. And some of them aren't affected like this because I'm assuming some of them just don't have the same strength. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. And I can help debug any issues that we're having going on. And like I said, I will be dropping a lot of resources in the description below for other aspects of this, as just the regular painting if you want to paint your landscape, and importing other things as well.